Good evening. I'm Leland Vittert. Welcome to the program. The apparent worldwide overreaction to Omicron continues. That's not me saying it. I'm not a doctor. Those words are coming from the doctor in South Africa who found Omicron, rang the alarm bells, and has treated the most Omicron cases thus far. This is the writing. I alerted the world to Omicron, and I believe Britain is overreacting, writes Dr. Angelique Coetzee in the Daily Mail. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson yesterday said the first person with Omicron died, but failed to say or answer whether the person died from Omicron or was already on death's door and just happened to have Omicron. A critical detail, as the Brits are already talking about canceling Christmas and enacting a January lockdown. Why is that important? What happens across the pond? Well, historically, during the pandemic, the UK is about 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the United States. So stay tuned. There is good news about Omicron. The Washington Post writes, Omicron variant more resistant to vaccine but causes less severe COVID, major South African study concludes. Here's the data. 2 doses of Pfizer's vaccine offers 70% protection from hospitalization. Here's one of the doctors who ran that study reminding us why we have vaccines in the first place.
The vaccines were developed to prevent severe illness and death. And what is very encouraging is that the vaccine effectiveness of this double dose of Pfizer-BioNTech holds at 70% in the Omicron wave.
And 3 doses evidently make it better than 70%. To prevent severe illness and deaths, it turns out vaccines are saving lives in South Africa, even with Omicron. The case fatality rate there plummeted to 0.5%. That's down from 2.5% in July. Even Dr. Fauci noted there's even more good news about Omicron.
The disease seems to be less severe, whether it's inherently less pathogenic as a virus or whether there's more protection in the community. We're just going to have to see when it comes in the United States.
And for those people who go into the hospital or get COVID, even if it is Omicron, how about this? We have yet another layer of protection from the variant. Pfizer says its COVID-19 pill is near 90% protective against hospitalization and death. That's both for the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. There's a curious thing happening, though, with the miracle medicine you're looking at there. While 1,000 Americans die a day from COVID, almost all of those are unvaccinated, the FDA is keeping the life-saving Pfizer pill in warehouses waiting for approval. We're going to dive into that issue in just a minute. For as successful as the vaccines are, President Biden's vaccine mandates have been an abject failure. Today, Amtrak, Mr. Biden's favorite mode of transportation, dropped its mandate, saying if they had fired all of their unvaxxed employees, they would have to cut service. Hospital chains dropped their mandates because they can't find enough vaccinated employees, and the courts continue to rule the president is overstepping his authority. But first, we want to get to the real threat from Omicron, what we know and, more importantly, what we do not. We bring in Dr. Bob Lahita, clinical professor of medicine at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School, author of more than 16 books and 150 publications in the field of autoimmunity. Good to see you, sir, as always. Past couple of weeks say, should we be more or less concerned as we learn more about Omicron?
We should be less concerned, Leland. It's still good to keep on guard, but basically Omicron is currently 3% of the current infections in the U.S. The Delta variant is still the major source of infection. In London, England, it's 44%. But as you know, as Dr. Fauci said and others, that this Omicron variant seems to be highly transmissible, but not severe insofar as causing severe illness, putting you on a respirator in the ICU, and causing death. Only 1 death occurred in England, and as you rightly said, we don't have any other data as to the age of the patient or any comorbidities.
Yeah, and that seems to be the real question in this, especially as it relates to whether people are vaccinated or not, in terms of what their outcomes are. About 1,000 people die a day of COVID-19. The vast majority of them are unvaccinated. David Frum, writing in The Atlantic, that it is time now to make a distinction, and this is becoming a debate between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. Number 4, the best option, let hospitals quietly triage emergency care to serve the unvaccinated last. Is that fair?
No, I don't think that's fair, and no doctor or nurse would do that. Our obligation is to treat everybody equally. So we cannot segregate people who have had the shot versus people who have not. I think it's a very creative statement, but I don't think it's real and realistic. We would never do that.
I know you like to stay away from politics, which is one of the reasons we really like having you on the show. And that's been very hard to do over the past 18 months or 20 months, and we really applaud you for it. But there is beginning to be this split among blue state governors about whether we move on or whether we sort of stay in pandemic mode. This is Jared Polis of Colorado, and then the White House press secretary responding. Take a listen.
What we see it as the end of the medical emergency, frankly. People who want to be protected are. Those who get sick, it's almost entirely their own darn fault.
I would say those are not the words the president has used or would use.
Does the governor have a point, though, that it's some time in the future, now or later, we're going to have to decide to move on from emergency mode, even if there are unvaccinated people?
I think that's going to happen in not quite yet, Leland, but probably in 2023. I have the feeling that this is going to peter out. But that's not to say that this virus is going to go away. I think it's going to become endemic, much like the flu, and that we're going to have, and I'm going to predict this, we're going to have a shot every year, which alters or is designed around the current variant of that year, much like influenza. That's coming. But I think this horrible situation that we have now, where we have wave after wave of infection, is eventually going to peter out and go away.
Yeah, it's great news. You brought up the flu, and this is flu season. We looked up the flu vaccine data according to the CDC. The vaccine for the flu is 40 to 60% effective. 2 shots of Pfizer, 70% effective against Omicron, 90+% effective if you get the booster. Why, if we lived a normal life under flu and we have something that's more effective than the flu vaccine against COVID is, why would we not live a normal life immediately under COVID with the vaccine?
That's a very good question. Actually, when the pandemic first started, we knew that the flu vaccine, which everyone was mandated to take in most hospitals, that it only had about a 40% effectiveness. So then when the COVID vaccine came out, the messenger RNA first, it was incredible that it was 90 to 95% effective, the first 2 shots against the Alpha variant. And then came the Delta variant, and of course the efficacy of the vaccine sort of got lower and lower. And now we're seeing that if you get the booster, you can boost your immune system up to 75 to 80%, even against the Omicron variant. So I have to tell you that these vaccines are extremely effective, and I laud them, and I laud their producers.
Yeah, we're going to spend a little bit of time on the producers in a minute. Hey, Doc, it was good to see you as always. And I said we always appreciate someone who's able to come on and separate the politics from the facts and talk about the facts. It's a lot harder than a hot take on TV. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Leland.
Yeah, good to see you. Just as Omicron arrives in America, President Biden's vaccine mandates are quite literally falling apart. But keep this in mind. If you take out the word mandate from the sentence that I just said, vaccines in America are more popular than dog ownership. We aren't kidding. 53% of American houses have a dog. 61% of Americans overall are vaccinated. In older Americans, vaccines are more popular than ice cream. But Americans have a funny way of not liking it when the government tells them what to do. Federally, the vaccine mandates are falling apart, and even private employers are giving up on enforcing the shot. Kellie Meyer is digging into that for us in Washington. Kellie, good evening.
Good evening, Leland. Well, everything from hospitals to the president's favorite mode of transportation, as you said, Amtrak, are dropping Biden's vaccine mandate because they say they won't have enough people to do the job. Some of the largest U.S. hospital systems letting go of the mandate. Senators on Capitol Hill telling me moments ago it is a self-inflicted wound for hospitals.
When you hear about hospitals being overflowing, part of that problem is the fact that they are short of staff. They were short of staff before these mandates. They're even shorter of staff once they've let people go or put them on indefinite leave. And this is a self-inflicted wound. It's unnecessary. It's idiotic.
That was Republican Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin I spoke with moments ago. He says the Biden administration shouldn't be forcing workers to get vaccinated, asking the president, who is he trying to protect? Leland?
Yeah, whether this is really about protection or politics. Amtrak, which I believe you're not too far from Union Station, then Senator Biden's favorite mode of transportation, government contractor. Why have they let go of the mandate?
Yeah, that's right. The president famously known for taking the Amtrak to and from Delaware from here on Capitol Hill. Amtrak now going against the president, giving up on his vaccine mandate because the rail company fears losing staff. Amtrak will still require COVID testing as an alternative for unvaccinated employees, but that could also change as these mandates are challenged in the courts. The White House today downplaying the decision to drop the mandate.
Certainly, vaccination or testing is something we have been recommending from the federal government, so I don't think we have any concern.
Leland, the Biden administration trying to hold on to mandates in the one place they can, the military. 27 of the 5,000 unvaccinated members of the Air Force and Space Force discharged from the service. A tiny drop in the bucket compared to the 300,000 members. The Pentagon now deciding if they will also mandate boosters. Leland?
Yeah, so that means there's 4,972 still unvaccinated who are allowed to stay in the military, if I got the math right. Kellie, thank you very much. Great reporting.
Thank you.
This is not the time for anybody to be profiting off of selling ventilators, vaccines, drugs, treatments, PPE anywhere in the world, and that requires the United States to be a global leader.
That's New Jersey Congressman Tom Malinowski back in April, we believe April of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. He made the case to MSNBC that no one should profit off the pandemic. Turns out a number of members of Congress were doing just that or have done just that. As the pandemic raged, at least 75 lawmakers bought and sold stock in companies that make COVID-19 vaccines, treatments, and tests. Let's look at some of the others. Josh Gottheimer, $15,000 of Moderna. The wife of Rep. Austin Scott, $50,000 of Johnson & Johnson. Mo Brooks of Missouri, $50,000 of Pfizer stock. John Yarmuth, $15,000 of 3M. They make masks and other things. The list goes on. Don Bayer, $15,000 of Regeneron. For all you just heard of, Tom Malinowski, $15,000, and David Price, $50,000 of 3M. We loathe hypocrisy and self-dealing on the show. So does Batya Ungar-Sargon, deputy opinion editor of Newsweek, who joins us now. In defense of the congressman, and I see you're shaking your head, so just go with me. In defense of the congressman, a number of them said it was not me, it was my stockbroker. I don't manage my own account. So is that a defense?
Do you think that's a defense, Leland?
I do, actually, but I'll let you have your say.
I don't know. Do you want a congressperson who doesn't know what's happening in their own portfolio? You know, Leland, when I saw this story, I thought of a word that our people like to use for instances like this, the word shanda, which means shame. For shame to be profiting off of Americans suffering at a time when we need upstanding leaders. Oh, what a shame this is. Tell me, how can you defend it, Leland?
Well, I can defend it if they're not the ones who know. I guess the alternative is that every representative has to liquidate all their assets and put it in treasury bonds or something like that. But it does sort of bring up this question of how much profit has happened from the pandemic, right? Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, the big three lobbying in 2020. Pfizer, $10.8 million, Johnson & Johnson, $7.9 million. On Capitol Hill. Moderna, which has just started, only spent $280,000. But it does bring up, and I'm actually interested in how you view this, because a lot of folks are really knocking the vaccine makers for making money off of this and saying, well, we shouldn't believe them because they've got skin in the game. Yeah, they've got skin in the game. They made something that worked and has saved millions of lives. Shouldn't they profit?
Well, there's a difference between saying that the people who invested millions of dollars, who created patents, who paid the geniuses to come up with this, that they should be able to get a profit off of something that they made, something the government promised that they were going to buy rather than force them to give away, and saying that, elected officials who are going to decide where our taxpayer money is going to go shouldn't be literally benefiting, profiting off of these things, these decisions that they're making as public servants. What happened to public service, Leland?
Yeah, well, that public service went out the door a long time ago. Back when people went to Washington for 2 or 4 or 8 years and they gave up their farms or their law practice because they believed in this. So much of this has been made, though, about whether or not there's parity, right? Whether or not around the world America is doing enough and giving enough vaccines. Is it wrong of America to keep the vaccines we need here before sending them to the rest of the world?
I don't think so at all. America first, man. Like, let's treat our own first. Let's take care of our neighbors first. I think that's a very human impulse. I will say that another thing I think this story really illustrates is that, when it comes to elites protecting themselves and their own interests, there's so much bipartisan support, right? There are Congress people on this list, senators on this list from both parties, Republicans and Democrats. They have no problem uniting and protecting their own assets when they need to. Yeah. And that it's only when they're, coming at the expense of Americans that they like to drum up that partisan divide.
Yeah, well, you make a very good point in terms of profiting while you're in Congress is a bipartisan issue. Batya, it was good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
Now, somehow this has become a partisan issue. We're going to talk about that.
Thank you so much.
The Waukesha community feels abandoned after the tragic Christmas parade attack killed 6. We're going to talk to somebody from Waukesha about how the President of the United States has yet to make a trip to Wisconsin. Why is that? And after his multi-million-dollar book deal, the former New York governor, well, he now owes taxpayers millions. How the Cuomo's year can't end soon enough. New York State wants $5.1 million from its former governor back. The State Ethics Commission approved Andrew Cuomo's pandemic book deal when he was still riding high as the pandemic's golden boy governor. The book deal came with a wild advance of nearly $800,000. Soon after the deal, the truth started to come out. Turns out his policies led to the deaths of thousands in nursing homes, something he tried to cover up before being forced to resign over sexual harassment charges. The media fawned over him as America's governor, who would write about leading his state with a steady hand through the start of the pandemic. Turns out his policies led to the deaths of thousands in nursing homes. Now he's accused of lying and covering up the true death numbers, not to mention having to resign over sexual harassment charges. Now the commission says Cuomo didn't live up to his end of the book deal and used state time and resources writing it. Thus, they can rescind the approval and get all the money back. Not surprising, Cuomo says fat chance to giving back his fat paycheck. Ben Jacobs, contributor for New York Magazine, with us now. Boy, Ben, just when you thought it couldn't get worse for Andrew Cuomo, here we go.
Yep, this is the year where everything just gets worse and worse for the former New York governor. That he started, as you mentioned, as having all this great coverage in 2020, and now he's out of office, facing misdemeanor charges of sexual misconduct, and may have to give up this $5.1 million book advance to the state of New York. It's not a good 2021 for Andrew Cuomo.
All right, so Cuomo's attorney, Jim McGuire, said the commission's actions today are unconstitutional, exceed its own authority, and appear to be driven by political interests rather than the facts and the law. How high realistically is the burden for them to prove that Cuomo somehow didn't live up to his end of the deal and has to give the money back?
Well, it becomes a little bit of a messy situation because they're arguing that Cuomo got approval to do the book under false pretenses. He said that he wouldn't use state resources, and the investigation into him revealed that there are all sorts of state employees helping out. There are talks with top aides back and forth. The argument this is, when an incumbent asks folks to work on a campaign. The state board didn't buy that, has revoked it. The state board also has been turned over quite a bit since Cuomo's resignation. And now it's also the question not just of whether they legally can get the money back, it's whether it's actually possible to do so. That Cuomo gave some of the money to charity, some of the money was paid in taxes, some of the money was put in trust for his daughter, some hasn't even been paid yet. So that there's not only the legal fight, because Cuomo is going to sue over this, but then there's a question, if Cuomo gave $500,000 to the United Way, what's that legal fight look like to, does he have to disgorge the money from them? Does he have to pay back differently? It's a messy situation because there is not a lot of precedent for this sort of thing.
Yeah, in addition to that, you'd have to think from his perspective, at least, this is some of the last bit of money he's going to be able to earn for a while. There's not a lot of job opportunities. A year ago, the DNC was going to replace him on the ticket, or 18 months ago was going to replace Biden with Cuomo because he was so popular at the convention, and now he's all but unemployable. What's your reporting on what Andrew Cuomo does next?
I think at this point, Andrew Cuomo sits and waits and deals with some of this to blow over, that there's obviously, with the release of the emails and the investigation, there's been a lot of criticism attached to some of the operatives who work with him. But I think the bet is that eventually, the hope is that that will blow over, that he's still sitting on this massive war chest of $17 billion. He's been elected 3 times in the state of New York. His father was elected 3 times too. And the hope is that some of this might be able to blow over as time goes on. But that's a question, that's not up to us. It's up to the voters. It's up to public opinion. And he still has to get through all the criminal allegations against him, the nursing home investigation. That there's a lot of, as Donald Rumsfeld would say, known unknowns for Andrew Cuomo's potential path for a comeback.
Maybe the best use of a Donald Rumsfeld quote I've heard in a very long time. Al Franken is probably still waiting for things to blow over to make his comeback tour. That said, is there any tying of Chris Cuomo's fate and Andrew Cuomo's fate together?
Excuse me?
Is there any tying of Chris and Andrew Cuomo's fate?
I think to some extent they're tied together because so much of Chris Cuomo leaving CNN was over his advice and his ties to his brother. Yeah. And that they're sort of in some ways tied together. Obviously, television is a different field than politics. Chris Cuomo has to get one TV executive to hire him rather than, millions of New York State voters to vote for him in the case of Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah, or Andrew Cuomo gets one linked. Yeah, or Andrew Cuomo gets 1 or 2 hedge fund executives to hire him on as an advisor, something to like to a private equity group. Hey, Ben, awesome conversation. We're going to read about it in New York Magazine and continue to follow your reporting. It's great stuff.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thousands of pets were lost and scattered after losing their homes in deadly tornadoes in Kentucky. Will shelters be able to keep up with these guys, and how you can help? First, the former president's chief of staff is on the verge of criminal contempt charges. The vote is happening literally in the next hour. What we're learning about Mark Meadows' role on January 6th, and why do Democrats care so much?
Our democracy was inches from ruin. Our system of government was stretched to the breaking point.
Perhaps a little hyperbolic, but it is Capitol Hill after all. There's high drama right now over the January 6th probe. Lawmakers in the House now debating ahead of a vote on whether to hold former Trump chief staff Mark Meadows in criminal contempt of Congress. There's debate, vote scheduled for a little later tonight. This after Meadows refused to testify before the committee. He cited executive privilege. Meadows is now suing Speaker Pelosi and the committee to block 2 subpoenas, saying the panel lacks lawful authority. The January 6th panel, did release text messages that Meadows received during the riots, revealing some high-profile people pushing for then-President Trump to condemn the attack on the Capitol, including the president's son, Don Jr., 3 Fox News hosts, and lawmakers. An unnamed lawmaker texted, "The president needs to stop this ASAP." Don Jr., "He's got to condemn this ASAP." Meadows replied, "I'm pushing it hard. I agree." Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of The Hill, our sister company, joining us now. Bob, from a process standpoint, what is the Democrats' playbook here? Who do they hope to prove something to? And what is it? We want Mark Meadows in handcuffs sometime around next September ahead of the midterms?
It's going to be very interesting because we know the outcome of the vote tonight is that it's going to pass. And then what will the Department of Justice do? Well, I mean, they certainly went after Steve Bannon, and you've got a Democratic DOJ. So I imagine they're going to go after Meadows. But are these guys going to serve any jail time? Probably not. And Leland, the clock is ticking here because in all likelihood, based on history and Joe Biden's approval rating, the House is going to flip. So this committee is going to last basically probably for another year. So if they're going to find anything new, they got to find it out real soon. And obviously, they're not getting a lot of cooperation from Trump allies who were involved and were talking to the president that day.
If you start with what rational people can agree, right? It was a riot because we watched it on television. President Trump's people, a number of them we were seeing with text messages, told him to stop it. The president did nothing to stop it. Why do Democrats think continuing to prove the obvious is a winning political strategy? What voters do they think are energized by this process?
I think the base. I mean, I don't think independent voters are paying much attention to it. They're paying attention to inflation, other issues that affect them on a daily basis, gas prices, that kind of thing. So I think it does fire up the base because they like investigating the Trumps. I found it kind of interesting that Trump Jr. had to go through the chief of staff to get word to his father. That's kind of bizarre, but I guess that's the setup that was at the White House at the time.
Yeah, I interviewed Don Jr. actually about the relationship he had with his dad one time. It was a professional one, not the kind of personal, loving relationship that typically sons describe about their fathers. You talk about the base. Well, President Trump had a base as well. Some Fox News hosts, the opinion, Laura Ingraham, Mark, president needs to tell people in the Capitol to go home. Sean Hannity, can he make a statement, ask people to leave the Capitol? Brian Kilmeade of The Morning Show, please get him on TV, destroying everything you have accomplished. As if this is somehow surprising. You know, if you looked at George Stephanopoulos' text messages to the Biden White House during the Afghanistan debacle, it probably would be a little bit different than George Stephanopoulos' questions to President Biden during his interview over Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you had these media figures who are well-known, who know the president very well, and they knew this was damaging, and yet Trump wasn't doing anything. And Mark Meadows honestly saying that the president swiftly dealt with this issue is just not factual, honestly. I mean, just look at the text. I mean, it's just not the case. I mean, Meadows is in a tough spot because the president doesn't want him cooperating. Meadows doesn't want to be in contempt of Congress. He served in Congress, and he also, doesn't want to go to jail, I'm sure. So he's
doesn't
stuck,
want to go to jail
between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, doesn't want to go to jail. Also doesn't really want to deal with the legal bills that are mounting here. These kinds of defenses at $1,000 an hour for Washington law firms is not cheap. It's interesting, you pointed out that this does, in a way, fire up the base. The more you talk about how bad Trump is, Democrats just sort of enjoy, from a political standpoint, talking about that. You hear that in the briefing room as well. I want to turn your attention to a little bit of a different question, though, that was asked in the briefing room. I'd actually never heard an exchange like this and wanted to get your thoughts. Take a listen to Jen Psaki today.
What does the administration consider your biggest achievement in foreign policy in this first year?
This is a great question. I want to be thoughtful about it. I want to talk to the president about it, and I'm happy to do that. Go ahead.
10 points for the Dodge, but I've never heard someone pass on a softball question.
Yeah, I mean, and you can answer that in any different ways. Leland, you don't have to say one thing. You could say a series of things, and certainly whether that's, a bipartisan infrastructure bill or putting sanctions on Russia, whatever it's domestic or foreign. But just it's a little unusual not to kind of hit that softball out of the park.
You brought up, and it almost seemed as though Jen Psaki was so surprised because even in a very generous view, it is hard to find right now a bright spot in the past 11 months of Biden foreign policy.
It is. On foreign policy, obviously, Afghanistan was a disaster, and the president has been defensive on that, and I don't think that has served him well. So, on foreign policy, remember, he used to chair the Foreign Relations Committee, so he certainly views himself as a foreign policy expert. But as we know, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates has famously said that Biden has been wrong on every big foreign policy decision over the last 4 decades, and certainly that did not help Biden on the campaign trail. And as far as Afghanistan, that's when his numbers started to go really low, and they're still low now. And he didn't get a bump from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. COVID is not getting any better right now. So it could be a long winter for the Biden White House.
Yeah, long Christmas break for Ron Klain, the chief of staff. It was interesting. George Will was on the program last night. He described the bump that you talked about in the polling numbers to a dead cat bouncing, which does indeed happen. How worried is the White House about the trifecta of foreign policy issues right now coming at it? You've got China and Taiwan, you've got Russia in the Ukrainian invasion that's likely coming, and you've got Iran, if it wants to be, weeks away from a nuclear weapon, and Israel threatening a unilateral strike. Is this a concern thing, or do they feel as though they don't really have any control over how their fate ends up?
Well, in some ways, it's frustrating because they're complicated issues. There are no easy answers, and at the same time, they can't control it. They don't want Putin to go into the Ukraine, and Putin's getting international pressure. But Putin's going to do what Putin's going to do, and Biden has took off U.S. troops off the table, which not surprising. But he said that publicly. And as far as Taiwan and China, again, they don't have control of that situation, and China and Russia know that we're not going to commit troops. And Biden's numbers are weak. So it doesn't look good at the moment for the president.
Yeah, you make a great point in that these are all problems, none of which the president in the White House is willing to spend the political capital and take the risks to take control of. And they realize it can all three of them are going to affect them negatively. Hey, Bob, always a good conversation. Good to see you.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah, another real problem for the Biden administration, the border crisis. Still getting worse as approval numbers on this is in the low 30s. Border town citizens are being told to stay inside and lock their doors. Jorge Ventura on the ground, on the border when we come back. Welcome back. President Biden's heading to Kentucky tomorrow. He's going to survey the damage from the deadly tornadoes there. And remember, the tornadoes went through so much of the American heartland, all the way from Missouri, Arkansas, and then all the way east through Kentucky, killed dozens. President Biden's going to likely also talk about climate change, and you can see just the destruction all the way through Kentucky. Mostly when this happens, they fly down some of the presidential helicopters, Marine One, and they will then fly over the destruction, land. The president talked to some folks, hears firsthand accounts, and you can see just how much different the aerial view is versus the view on the ground. The White House so far hasn't released an exact schedule, but flies into Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which obviously is a large military base where the president will get a briefing and then heads out. The visit will undoubtedly get massive media attention. So you have to ask, is it a coincidence that the White House picked the same day to send Jill Biden, the First Lady, and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff to Waukesha, Wisconsin to meet with victims and healthcare workers? It's taken nearly a month after a driver intentionally plowed his SUV into a Christmas parade, killing 6 people and injuring dozens. The suspect, as you might remember, is a career criminal with a lengthy rap sheet. He was released on low bail prior to the attack. He had shared posts calling for violence against white people. The visit comes as Waukesha residents say they feel abandoned after the parade attack, and the incident doesn't fit the narrative. That's what the residents there are telling us, and are wondering perhaps if Joe Biden is showing up on the same day the president's going to get a lot more coverage on an issue that he wants to talk about in Kentucky. We're going to watch the coverage, and we encourage you to as well, of Joe Biden's visit to Waukesha and President Biden's visit to Kentucky, and compare the two. We'll do that tomorrow on the program. We're going to also talk to the man who took this video. Take a look. Well,
hey, no te muevas. Go, Brian, go there, Mike.
Department of Public Safety. They continue to find large groups of illegal immigrants trying to make their way north from the border to human smugglers waiting on the other side of Border Patrol checkpoints. The Texas State Troopers and Rangers can only work on private ranches. We're going to talk to Lieutenant Chris Oliveras of the Texas Department of Public Safety tomorrow about how the federal government still forbids the Texas Troopers from enforcing immigration laws on the federal lands of the border. Even the federal courts think President Biden's policies have some issues. An appeals court has rejected another appeal by the Biden administration. The Biden administration wants to end the Trump-era policy of remain in Mexico, which had forced tens of thousands of migrants to wait in Mexico while their asylum case was made to a U.S. judge. But now groups of illegal immigrants, drawn by the administration's essentially open-door policy, have overwhelmed border towns. We talked to the mayor of Yuma, Arizona, a couple of days ago. They've now ended their state of emergency as the feds have sent hundreds of extra agents. But as we have learned covering this story, hundreds of extra agents in Yuma means other parts of the border will remain unguarded. Jorge Ventura, border reporter for the Daily Caller, knows that as well. He joins us now from Yuma. Jorge, I want to talk to you about this tweet because it was unbelievably concerning. Just encountered a group of Mexican nationals, men, crossing illegally with a large group of migrants from South America. This is your writing. They were trying to convince me to take them to Yuma. In exchange, they said they would give me a little girl. Explain that.
Yeah, Leland. So I arrived in Yuma today, and Border Patrol continues to be overwhelmed, as well as the law enforcement will continue to run into migrants from really all over the world, but especially South America here in the Yuma sector. And I encountered a group of 5 Mexican nationals, all men, who actually snuck in with those South American migrants. And they were trying to convince me to drive them into Yuma and that they would give me a little girl in exchange. I obviously kept refusing, but there wasn't any Border Patrol nearby. About 30 minutes later, Border Patrol finally arrived, and that's when those Mexican nationals then decided to turn around and actually head back to Mexico. I actually got a little video of that. So you'll see in my video where those Mexican nationals head back into Mexico, but in the same route where they're heading back into Mexico, we're seeing those Haitian migrants come into us. And that's one thing that Border Patrol agents were actually telling me on the ground. They're noticing that there's an uptick actually in the Mexican nationals who are trying to come into the United States. Now, one thing to also remember, these Mexican nationals, they are trying to evade Border Patrol. So they're not trying to be apprehended like these family units, like these Haitians and Central Americans and South Americans. They're trying to evade, and they're basically sneaking in with these large South American groups. So that's an area of concern for the Border Patrol here in the Yuma sector.
Obviously, thankfully, they encountered you rather than somebody else. But are we to believe, and did you take them at face value, that that's how they're transacting to get people across? If these were cartel members saying, look, to nefarious and bad people on the other side, on the American side, we'll literally give you human beings in exchange for helping us get other people across the border. Is that happening?
Oh, absolutely. They were very serious, and they were really trying to pressure me to drive them over to Yuma. They pointed out my car and they said, "Hey, just let us hop in. We'll pay you. We could even give you a little girl." They said they could give me a 9-year-old little girl, and obviously I rejected, but those men were serious. And once again, when I'm speaking to agents on the ground, they're actually concerned of the Mexican nationals who are now trickling in now with these large units. And these are the gotaways. So these are the men who are able to evade Border Patrol and able to make it inside the United States. So it's especially an area of
I only got
concern.
about 30 seconds, but we're so always happy to have you on because of how much time you've spent on the border, both during the Trump administration, now during the Biden administration. Based on your experience today, has this taken a dangerous turn in terms of what these cartels are willing to do and their brazenness doing it, or are we making too much of someone offering you a 9-year-old?
No, I believe the situation is getting worse. These folks are getting more brazen. Even today, Leland, one of the Mexican human smugglers actually crossed into the United States and was actually demanding one of the migrants to pay him in cash and to give him his iPhone. I mean, this was happening on American soil. So they're not worried about any type of law enforcement at all. They know that they are basically overwhelmed with this huge amount of family units that continue to come. And if the situation doesn't get better, if the Remain in Mexico policy doesn't get reinstated and actually follow through here in Yuma, I expect these numbers to continue to rise as we head into the new year.
Yeah, we had the Yuma mayor on a couple of days ago, I think it was on Friday, talking about this state of emergency that's happened in his town because there were just gangs of migrants roving around Yuma. The Border Patrol was overwhelmed. People were trying to turn themselves into the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol was saying, we're too busy, just go to the McDonald's and we'll deal with you later. What is the feeling in Yuma now? Is that still happening, or are there enough agents there that at least they can process the people who are coming?
There's definitely not enough agents, Leland. I mean, I spent time today all on the ground, and I was running into large family units. And the real area of concern is that these large units don't even have anywhere to go because Border Patrol is not apprehending them. So they're actually waiting for hours and hours for someone to arrive to apprehend them. And then you get to see in that video where these migrants are literally walking themselves to Border Patrol. I mean, they're walking into the city of Yuma. We've never really seen anything like this before. I actually just got done speaking to a business owner who was highly alarmed that these migrants were doing this. I mean, they had to cross through a couple of schools to even turn themselves in. So it's a high area of concern here in Yuma. Let me just remind the audience, I mean, just this past weekend, over 2,600 migrants crossed illegally. And that's not even counting the gotaways. So it's getting pretty bad here in Yuma. It just seems that the situation is not getting better. I would expect those numbers to continue to rise until that Remain in Mexico policy is enforced in this sector.
Well, not only is it enforced, but we understand the Biden administration saying, yes, we are sending people back to Mexico, but only 20 or 30 a day because we don't think the Mexicans are going to deal with them properly. So there's a lot of fudging that seems like is going on, probably too light of a word, really. Cheating, perhaps, you could also use. But you and I have been on the border together before, and it's really a game of whack-a-mole between the cartels and the Border Patrol and the Texas State Troopers and others. You've got this big surge coming of federal agents into Yuma, obviously, because the administration doesn't want another Del Rio Bridge situation where people are living under a bridge and the media focuses on it. So the question would be this: where is the next area that the cartels are going to exploit to move people and drugs across while everybody's tied up in Yuma?
Well, as of right now, it actually seems like Yuma is their hotspot. So when that Remain in Mexico policy, when that ruling came down, according to our sources, it was only being reinstated in El Paso, Texas, in Brownsville, Texas, and San Diego, California. I couldn't get a U.S. official to confirm me whether that policy was going to be enforced in Arizona. So actually, I would expect that Arizona will continue to be the hotspot. And we're seeing it today. I mean, I'm just continuing to run into migrants from all over. I'm talking about Haiti, from Chile, from Brazil. We even met some from Romania, Georgia, and Uzbekistan. So from really all over the country, they continue to cross through Yuma, especially South America. I mean, just in October of this year, Yuma saw over 21,000 South Americans seek asylum. Now, you compare that to October 2020, that number was only at 790. So it seems that Yuma is continuing to be that hotspot for the cartels to continue to push these units here.
Yeah, for sure. And you're on the ground reporting on it. Jorge, thanks as always. We're going to keep watching your videos. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Leland.
Hey, Bill O'Reilly coming up next as the House votes to hold Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, in criminal contempt. What Bill thinks of the January 6 texts. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.